In this video, we're going to have a discussion on the function call with OpenAI. Now, we already know that all these, the companies like OpenAI, Claude, and Anthropic, everyone is behind making a proper agentic ecosystem altogether. Now, one of the, very primitive version of what the OpenAI started was something called as the function call. The idea was that all the AI or all these LLMs that you look across has a limitation of what it can do. And in order to cross those limitations, you want some other XYZ functionality to it. Just imagine that, hey, I want my AI, I want my, you ask an LLM a question that, hey, can you analyze all the files in my system? Files in my laptop. The problem is, LLM is good in doing reasoning, but it cannot take certain actions to it because it does not have the access to all the files of your system, or it does not have the capability to read the files of your system and stuff like that. So in order to increase the capability of the LLM, that's exactly where the entire discussion of the function calling came across. So OpenAI came across with something called as the function call. The idea was to increase the capability of the LLM. So now what you can do is like you can just write a simple function and for example, access file. And this function, you write all the piece of code which is necessary to access a file. And obviously it's pretty much easier to write this, function altogether. And then about this function, whatever this specific function do, you inform these, the about this function that what this particular function do to LLM. Similarly, you also write on the function called as, what is the weather function. And let's say you wrote some third-party API tool, made a third-party API call over here to know the current weather of a specific city. So when you ask an LLM a question that, hey, analyze all files in my laptop, the LLM totally understand that, even though I know about that I have two tools connected to me, I have to choose this specific tool. So LLM is acting as a brain to understand which specific tool it has to select. And that's called as the simple function calling. So LLM basically decided that, okay, fine, I'm supposed to have this access file. It runs that specific function. Whatever the output that you get from that specific function, you LLM fetch that output, then analyze those output, and finally give you a relevant output to it. That's how the entire function calling basically works. Now, in order to work with a function call, what you have to do is you need to basically create you need to have an OpenAI account, definitely, and then an API key for it. Now, in previous video, we already created an API key. That's the same key that we are basically going to have. Now, in order to keep this very simple, right, what we are going to do is we are going to create a very simple function, like an addition function, whose responsibility to add two number. And you write this logic, like how to add basically the two numbers. The whole idea would be that about this function, I give this information to the OpenAI that, hey, OpenAI, that I have this add number function. This is what this specific function do and stuff. And then OpenAI basically, whenever you ask a specific question to OpenAI, OpenAI makes a call to this function and they kind of, get through it. So that is basically a very simple, function calling to it. Now, in order to work with that, that's exactly what we are going to do now. We are going to write a few codes, around it to basically work around with it. In order to have a bit more meaningful, I already had posted about the function calling with a proper DevSecOps project in one of my video. I'll attach the link to the video as well in the description. Also, also in the you'll find it at the end card as well. Do watch out for a proper for a end-to-end project on it. So without wasting time, let's start by writing the code. So our first objective would be to fire up my uh, fire up my Visual Code Studio, and inside .env file I have already added OpenAI key altogether. So I'm going to use this specific OpenAI key for my for my users as well. So you can see like an OpenAI API key I've already specified in my .env file. So how I'm going to have it? Yeah, I mean, if you're pretty much confused about how to work around with this, well, actually, OpenAI already talked about the function calling OpenAI. You can just look into their official documentation of how they basically do the function, calling all together, and they have a pretty much nice list of uh, you know, the description of how they are basically making a function calling as well. So the idea is pretty much simple. What they do is like you just have to call the OpenAI. Obviously, this is like fetching the and setting up the OpenAI for that purpose. Then you specify the tool that you basically want to do. So for example, if I wrote a function for call as a get function, right? Add of addition of the two number, I specify that specific function over here. Like that is the work of that specific function. Okay. Apart from that, I do specify, if I have to take any input or something, I do specify that. And then finally, I just have to iterate it, through it. So I just have to, run through the, parameters as well. So either we can just copy paste directly from here, or we can just do it in, bits and pieces, right? So we'll be kind of hopping across here and there in order to basically work around with this. So without wasting time, let's start by writing the function first because that is pretty much easier to work around that, right? Add numbers, right? A float. Let's work with a float. Float. And I'm just going to return this function, right? So this is a pretty much simple function which just makes narration. Now before this, so my function is all up and ready. I'll specify about these function, and this is more like a specifying what this specific function can do, right? Yeah. So you just have to specify what this specific function does, the name of the function. So obviously the name of the function is add numbers and specify it, and what this function do, right? So you specify this function add two numbers and return the sum. Pretty much what you write down. Okay, type is object, properties. Okay, so in the properties you write about what are the parameters that it basically returns. So obviously we it takes, right. So it takes some parameters of an a and b, which are the two numbers, right. So over here I have to basically modify this up a bit, specifying about what are the things that it has to work around. So properties would be at this point would be, let's say for example, I'm just going to write about a, and you can also specify a bit more, like for example, the type of this. So it's a number. Similarly, you can write about the b, the two of them, what we are basically taking care of. Okay, so we have these two numbers in place, right? So once this has been done, right, we specify, okay, it is specify required, but we don't have the, so we have these two, A and B are kind of the required ones there. Okay, fair enough. Now that we have, specified about this, what this specific function does, We also have to not to forget but to initialize our function. Now at this point, because I have to modify this a bit because my API code are basically sitting inside my .env file, right? So I need to basically import that out, right? So import OS, and also I'm just going to import like .env from. So I'm just going to import the load.env, right? Okay, so it will just load the .env, then I'll just fetch my API key, which is going to be from os.get env, and I'm just going to fetch the specific API key for this. For people who have already worked with, function already, it's pretty much simple to kind of work with that, right? API key, will specify the API key, right? So, okay, fair enough. Now you can also write a fallback plan that if the API key does not exist, and obviously you can throw an error that hey, API key is not being found. Okay, so we do have, I would say like it's better that that I add this tools about this information afterwards. Makes more logical sense. Okay, so at this point now I have this information. I take two input from the user as well, because this is where I just have to get an idea. Enter the first number and let us do a strip, right? So I take the input from two numbers, right? And now all I have to do is like work around on how it's basically going to fetch the information from the user. Okay. At this point, you see, like, we have these something called as the input list, where it basically talk about a role, what is, the content, which is like, specifying about the users and everything. Now, in order to do this, I'll basically copy this up. Okay. So I'll just copy this up. I can even like, go ahead and, copy the response messages, which I am basically kind of, working around, an output, and finally how they basically process out the output. Obviously, or at this point I will have to go back and change a lot of colors. So finally the final input and the responses, right? Okay, so that's all. I guess that will basically give me the at least the input list that we have, right? Also, if you want, you can further go ahead and fetch all the other informations as well. So just okay. So I will just start from one by one. Let's start with the input list one by one. Now this says that okay, what is this basically going to be about? Content, and instead of just an input list, I can write like something like messages. Okay, so I just specify use the numbers tool for a equal to, and then I specify a and b equal to b, then explain the result in one short line. So I'm just giving him an instruction that hey, all you have to do is like take these two input, which is an a and b, which we have got it from the user, and then explain the result in in a short line, right? Now, which makes sense because now I just have to do is like I just have to follow out the process of creating the responses and then putting them across as well. So it's pretty much actually pretty much same easy to basically kind of work with it. Okay, so at this point instead of input list, I'll just put this across. Okay, so now I have these responses as well, right? So all I'm doing is I am getting these messages, putting up the specifying which model I'm supposed to use, specifying the tools, and these tools are already in this specific variable that I have already put across. If you have multiple tools, you can actually increase these number of tools over here as well, and then specify the message that I'm basically passing. So now at this point, when you basically send a response, like when you create this specific request to an LLM has an idea about which tool to use, which tool to make a call to, and what are the messages that you are asking to. So LLM will basically make a call to this specific tool, giving him these two values that you are basically passing on in the message itself about A and B, right? And then it gets a output response towards it. Now once it gets an output response, I'll just have to do is like fetch these responses and then display those responses as well, right? So for item, so now from here onwards again I'll just go back. So actually I should copy this across. Okay, so I wouldn't need these parameters because I might have to I'll have to change this across. So item name would be this uh, numbers, right? So because that's the name of the function that we have. Okay, this is like actually executing the function. So it has to execute a function, right? So this is what we are basically how we are basically executing the function. So result, and I'll just write like we are fine, let's just add the numbers. And here, because I have to add multiple, output together, so I'll just write JSON dot loads item dot arguments. Okay, so this basically, takes whatever number that it has, you know, obtained, whatever the number it has obtained. It will basically fetch those numbers to this function and wait for an output to come across. So now that you have achieved the output, your next set of an option is to, to go across and append these values. So upon the function call, specify the call ID, it's our ID altogether, and then you specify the dump. Now this dump, I don't need this. I'll just okay. I just need to do is result. So I just dump this up, right, and that's it. Now, finally, what are the messages that I'm receiving over here, right? As a final list, if you want, you can actually, input the messages as well, just in case if you want to see the value. And then the whole idea is that first I create a response. First I send this, response that, hey, I want to use these two numbers and add the, add it. Then this GPT basically makes a call to the function that you have already specified to it. So it makes a call to the add number function. The add number function comes back. Then it goes back to the LLM, and then LLM generates a proper output. So now the process is that it has to whatever the output that has been generated, I have to fetch this specific output, back to the value altogether. So I just have to append these specific messages all together. That's it. So, and that's what I'm basically doing. So instead of, getting the response, I can simply write, hey, you know, I mean, if you want any specific instructions, you can write it down. If you don't want, we can just skip this part as well. But if you have any specific instructions to write, you can definitely go ahead and write those specific instructions as well, right? So we give them, and finally, what are the responses that we are getting? We are basically literally printing those responses as well. Now, to be honest, if you just want a final output, just put a final response dot. I don't have to write, so many things actually. So just specify response dot output underscore text, and it should be done. Okay, so that's it. Like, it's not a lot of code. What we did is like, we created this specific function, which about add numbers. We created a tool about it that, hey, this is a tool. We inform the LLM about this function. And then we take the input, just like the actual working, we take the input we of the two numbers, we put this specific input to the LLM. LLM decides that, okay, fine, you know what, for this specific purpose, I know the right guy. It can add underscore numbers, it calls that function, it does the activity here. The output of this is fetched back to the LLM. It optimizes the output and fetches us with the you know final output crafted by through it. That being said, if everything worked fine, which means the moment we run, okay, that's the 45, 7, and it should do the calculations. It goes back, it goes back to the LLM, and then LLM basically says, hey, you know what? And you can see, like, LLM says, this is the instruction that we are providing, that hey, these are two numbers that you are supposed to do the calculations and stuff, and this is like a final output that we are getting, right? So sum of 45 and 67 is 1 and 2, simply the two numbers added together. That's it. So yeah, that's a very basic LLM call that we have made. The series of a project which is there, I've added, as I mentioned, I've added these DevSecOps project. If you come from a DevOps background, if you come from a security background, do check out that specific project corresponding to the cloud as well. I hope you will love that specific project. Couple of projects are already there in the bartman.ai. Go out there and check out the project over there as well. The links of those two are already specified in the description below. Feel free to check them out. So that's all from this video. See you in the next video.